Okay, let's get into some key Agile concepts. These are going to include what I have found to be the best pieces of Agile that work at that work at all levels for the most part, all industries, and are easy to adopt. Basic best practice pieces that maybe if you're new to Agile, you try some of these pieces first, such as minimum viable product. The MVP, as it's commonly referred to, is a vision of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. So you might want to build a new widget for your client, and you're just starting out. Well, what would satisfy them early while also being able to allow them to provide feedback? Say it's a tool. Um, so you create something that's maybe the shape of a tool, but doesn't exactly fit the need, or it it, it doesn't do the job that the client wants. Well, at least you created a tool. You created something small that we can talk about and be transparent about, that the client can then provide feedback on. And then finally, on minimum viable product, seeing what people actually do with respect to a product is much more reliable than asking people what they would do. So people can say one thing, but a lot of times they do another. So that's why it's much more valuable to have something that is working at the end of the day versus just an idea in someone's head. I'm sure a lot of folks that are listening to this training are visual learners. And so actually putting something in front of your client is much, much better than the theoretical or concepts. Um, then we're going to move on next to Scrum artifacts. So something else that we'll get into during this section on Scrum, but are the Scrum artifacts. Um, These are the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and increments. Now, Agile's changed a little bit over time. Some groups still recognize increments, some do not. But first, the product backlog. The product backlog lists all features, functions, requirements, enhancements, and fixes that constitute the changes to be made to the product in future releases. Product backlog items have the attributes of description, order, estimate, and value. This is the to-do list. This is the larger view of items that are long-term and bigger effort. So this is that setting of a vision. Even if a leadership is heavily involved in the day-to-day and constantly micromanaging, they might not have expressed the overarching view and the long term of what we're doing. And that's what the product backlog does, versus a sprint backlog, which is the set of product backlog items. So you're pulling things from the product backlog into the sprint backlog and select them for the sprint. So this small amount of time that you're working on it, and then plus a plan for delivering these items to the sprint goal. Sprint goals is a common term that Agile teams work with, where they set a goal at the beginning of a set box of time and commit to it that they can actually get it done. So think of it this way: product backlog, high level, 10,000 foot view; sprint backlog, team level, less than a month view. And these are very important to keep updated and highly prioritized, but most importantly, transparent. Quick aside, the organizations that I've worked with in the past, these are, um, even if a group really doesn't want to do too much Agile or they're being forced into it, everybody sees the value in a prioritized to-do list. That's what this is. I will highly recommend that you use some technology to track this work, like a Jira or a Confluence, even if you just want to write them down versus track. Something to make it transparent amongst your group so everyone kind of can see what the group is working on and why we're working on it. Next, I want to speak about um, the concept of themes, epics, stories, and tasks. This is simply breaking down work. This is a very key Agile concept that works regardless if you're doing Agile or whose role you have where. We need to categorize if our work is big or if our work is small. So an example of a theme is very large piece of work that spans across an entire organization. This might be a completely new product on the market versus an epic, which is a large body of work that can be broken down into smaller pieces. So this is functionality of that product. These are additional attachments to the product, or this is the ROI we want to get out of the product, pieces like that, and how to actually understand them. Versus a story, this is written from a user's perspective, user stories, and we'll get into the user story template in a second. And the way it's broken down is as a customer, I want to be able to save save a product in my wish list so that I can view it again later. So here, without me even explaining any background, we get the basic idea that a customer wants to save a product in a wish list. That's a story. Another example is as a customer, I want to be able to view my wish list so that I can buy items from it. Now, did you notice what's in there? As a blank, I want blank so that I can blank. And we'll break that down in a second. But even smaller is at the task level. Very small piece of work, a very small item might be less than a day, certainly less than a sprint to work on and do. Each team's going to be different. There's no exact way of classifying these things. What you should be doing is running an exercise of comparing bigness. So maybe not even put a number on it. Some organizations do, some organizations don't. But a good agile practice that, again, regardless if you're agile or not, but a good concept to grasp is measuring if it's a big piece of work or small piece of work, and that should not be done by one individual. A leader might have a really good idea of what the finish line looks like, but the teams are going to have really good ideas around. So let's go into how we actually write these pieces. This is an epic template. An epic is a body of work that can be broken down into user stories based on the needs, requests of customers or end users. Epics are almost always delivered over a set of sprints as a team learns more about an epic through development and customer feedback. User stories will be added and removed as necessary. That's the key with Agile epics. Scope is flexible and it's based on current customer feedback and the team's schedule. So think of this as a requirements document. We need a title. Just a very simple title works. Uh, this title will be used in many discussions. So it's going to be constantly brought up because it's a big item that we're going to break down into smaller items. An overview. Provide 3 to 5 sentences is usually pretty good of what the purpose is and the key functionality of it is. A lot of times, pro tip here is a lot of times individuals will provide a kind of what was our case study, right? So think of the beginning part of a case study. What's that end state look like? Well, that's where you're going to start to write that overview. Benefit hypothesis, provide clear rationale why we are delivering this epic, not just someone said to do it. We need to know why this is actually going to benefit somebody. Product requirements, provide a list of in-scope product requirements that the epic should achieve, outlining what the team will need to design, build, test, and release. So again, basic concept, basic best practice in any framework is good requirements. The way that this is done a little bit differently in Agile is we're actually listing out what's in scope. And you should be very dogmatic on what's out of scope because that's going to really trim the fat around working on simplicity, as we've already discussed. Technical requirements, provide a list of in-scope technical requirements that the epic should achieve. So not just functionality, but from a technical standpoint, this is really going to help if it's a development product or code, individuals will write that said code. So just break it down into pretty detailed areas. At a smaller level, we're going to speak to the user story templates. So user story templates are smaller pieces of work than the epics. A key component of Agile development is putting people first, and user stories actually put the end user first. They put them at the center of the conversation. Stories use non-technical language to provide context for the development team and their efforts. After reading a user story, the team knows why they are building, what they are building, and what the value it creates. Stories are typically completed within a sprint. So again, another best practice, another good area to kind of focus on is putting yourself in the customer's shoes, putting yourself in the end user's shoes. What are they going to get out of it, and what do you think they're going to like about it or not like about it? And then write it down. Agile is very much anti-documentation, but it's not anti-correct documentation. It's anti-over documentation just for the sake of writing things down. User stories, be detailed. Epics, be detailed. So acceptance criteria are a set of statements, each with a clear pass-fail result that specify both functionality and non-functionality. So what does this mean? Think about it in terms of, did it work the way I said it was going to work? And so provide a list of conditions that the product must satisfy. What is that acceptance criteria? This is the finish line. In Agile, the finish line is just called the acceptance criteria from a developer or from a user standpoint that's actually creating the product. So we provide a title, simple, short title. This can be much less detailed than an epic. The epic needs to be fairly detailed out. So the stories can be more empathetic and design thinking in nature, where you're putting yourself in the end user's shoes. And then description, I mentioned this earlier, as a blank. So as a user, I want blank. What's my goal? So that blank. What's our reason? So a good example of this is when I redid my bathroom. Some of you might have painted or redid a room in your house, something like that. So as a homeowner, I want new tile in my bathroom so that I don't have to look at the ugly old tile in there from before. That's the description. That's a user story template in a nutshell right there. As a homeowner, I want new tile in my bathroom so that I don't have to stare at the ugly old tile. And you can already kind of start to picture, what's the old tile kind of look like? What's the new tile look like? Right? So you kind of get an idea of, all right, so you didn't like the aesthetics of it, so that's an important piece. There's work to be done. Um, and you want to be happy within your household. So then finally, the acceptance criteria provide a list of conditions that the product must satisfy, as I mentioned. So for that same example, it must be a white tile, let's say. It must be a square tile. It must be no bigger than 6x6 tile. And it must be well done with well done edging and grouting work. Right there, you've got a pretty good idea of what the flooring is going to look like. Yeah, sure, there's going to be some different concepts within it, but that's kind of the freedom and nice aspects about Agile is we've set the guardrails. Now let's go explore and build. So these other pieces are gone into more in other sections or lectures, but it's really important to understand that having clear roles is great for any organization, regardless if it's Scrum or not. So a product owner bridges the team and the customer and curates the vision. So communicates kind of the direction that we're heading back to the team. They're responsible for that backlog prioritization pieces. Scrum Master serves as a coach and facilitator to the team. A lot of Scrum Masters are constantly referred to as the bulldog of the team because they also protect the team and they protect kind of the Scrum process. If you're not running Scrum, fine. These would be considered project managers. And then finally is the actual delivery folks, who's actually doing the work. the backbone of production. So consist of professionals who actually get things done. Um, and they understand how to review things and interact and inspect and adapt and constantly get better. We get into a lot of these concepts in other lectures, but the reason I put it into Agile, into key concepts, is it clearly defines roles. So even if you're not an Agile organization, um, please set up a structure where there are defined roles and responsibilities within your group. And my final favorite piece of key agile concepts, there's a few in other lectures, but for this small section, my personal favorite is a Kanban board. The work of all Kanban teams revolves around the Kanban board, as you might have guessed. It's a tool to visualize work and optimize the flow of the work among the team. While physical boards are popular among some teams, virtual boards are pivotal. So using Jira, something like that. This allows for traceability, easier collaboration, and accessibility from multiple locations. You can get it from your phone, from your home, from your office, from your flight, what have you. And it goes back to the transparency and collaboration aspects of Agile, those mindset pieces that we hone upon. The main functions of Kanban boards are to ensure the team's work is visualized, ensure the workflow is standardized, ensure all blockers and dependencies are immediately identified and resolved. The Kanban methodology relies upon full transparency of work and real-time communication of capacity. Therefore, the Kanban board should be seen as a single source of truth to the team's work. We mentioned the backlogs earlier. Those are great. This is where the work gets done. This is where the team can break down, person A is doing this, person B is doing this, person C is doing this. And where leaders really like Kanban is they can constantly add to that list of things that they are doing. It's almost like a never-ending to-do list that can be reprioritized. So think of it taking that incremental and iterative approach and taking it to the next level. This is very popular within manufacturing. I believe it was Toyota that came up with Kanban in the 70s, something like that. Either way, it is used a ton in manufacturing processes because it works. It is very much a popular concept to combine Scrum with a Kanban board. It's not best practice. However, it's kind of a fragile-ish way of going about it, is taking concepts that you like. So I do personally like the Kanban board quite a bit, and highly recommend it to a lot of the folks because you can constantly add to that backlog.